Hello, everyone, and welcome to altPOV.radio. Today, our guest is Sierra Neblina, and the best way to put this would be to say that Sierra has a fascinating story, and we're going to talk to her about her journey from the time that she was a child. Just a little background. Basically, from a very young age, Sierra she had heightened psychic abilities, and she would have prophetic dreams. She had healing abilities, and her parents, her dad worked in the military, and she never could quite figure out what he did. But years later, she learned that her parents actually consented to participate in a human hybrid ET experiment, and a lot of things happened over the years to obviously bring Sierra to that conclusion as well. And we're going to talk about all of that, starting with her journey as a child and her abilities as a child, and then moving on into her time in the military, her serving when she was in Kuwait, when she came back, something that happened at Norad. I'm trying to condense everything because I want her to tell the story, but basically I want to introduce Sierra. Sierra, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jack. It's so great to be here with you.
And I've been, you and I spoke maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We first met, and we were during when we were working on the documentary, and both John and I were blown away by your story, so much so that we always knew we wanted to talk to you more about it and learn more about it, and always thought it was important that you shared your story with as many people as you could, and you have done that since. So we wanted to share that story with our listeners today on the show. Let's just start from the beginning. You tell us about your childhood, where you were born, and about your parents, and then we'll go from there.
That sounds great. I'm going to go a little bit further back than what people normally start, because I think it's important to cover that I was a conscious being who chose to come to the planet at Gaia's beckoning call. So we'll touch a little bit on the timeline rifts, the violation of timelines, and why Gaia would have even put out a call like that to begin with. But basically, I was a Pleiadian ambassador to Earth, and I was upon a science vessel called the Phoenix, and I was approximately 1,495 years old at the time that I chose to come to Gaia's beckoning call. There was a timeline that we could see starting to develop. We were seeing that a lot of things were being interrupted by humans that had gotten the technology to be able to time travel and started messing with the timeline in a very unproductive way for the people of the planet and for all the beings of the planet. Now, Gaia is a living library. She is extremely unique in all of the universes that she's a chronicle of every bit of work over millennia, over the entire time of creation. Gaia holds in her energetically and physically all of creation. And so she's an extremely important planet to protect, and not only for us as human beings who've been the steward, but all the galactic beings, our galactic family, and all the angelic realm and elemental realm is very interested in making sure that what's happened on other planets like Maldek and different, Venus and a few other places does not happen here on this planet, because how important Gaia is as a living library. So I made the choice to come down to the planet because as the soul that I am and where I came from and at the originating source, I am a part of the crew that maintains and helps to develop timeline, to hold timelines consistent, hold dimensions correct, and to also help assist in the fabric of the dream time or the creation of any given planet or any given species and the outcome of their planet. I've traveled around with a team I called a SWAT team for a millennia, for lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes of helping different planets meet anthropos, to become sovereign, to understand what who they are. And so when I chose to come to this planet, I chose to pick a very beneficial lifeline where I could expose some pretty critical things that are happening in our government and the world. And so I chose to be born into a family with a mother and a grandmother who had already involved in the hybridization program, the Zeta hybridization program with the government. And I chose the timeline to realize that my father that I drew in also, that I still believe to this day to either be hybrid himself or a galactic being that's been working with the government and the hybridization program. And he continues to work in the government as in the what we call, and actually what Richard Dolan refers to as the breakaway society, the ones who hold themselves outside of law, human law, world law, universal law. At this point, I believe he's a good guy with the bad guys. How I know that this is true so far is that he's helped to protect me all these years, because especially in the last couple of years when I've really come forward and started publicly speaking about my story. I'm currently working on a book to give the whole story, but what's really important is that I am a part of a number of many souls that were called to Gaia to help impact all of the disruption that these societies have done on the timeline, on our planet, to people's bodies, to their natural evolution, and so forth. And so there's just a whole bunch of us that got called down to the planet to assist from the inside, because we can impact from the inside a lot better than we can as observers on the outside of the matrix. Some of you have heard that we've got the Archon net around the planet, and that is very true. It attempts to hold us away from consciously connecting with our galactic brothers and sisters, connecting with our own source, our own higher selves, our own intuition, our own guidance. And they further complicate that by using the chemtrails, by putting fluoride in our water and dumbing down and keeping our pituitary gland from activating and the DNA in our body from activating. And so to meet that, the light has sent a bunch of warriors to the planet, and I happen to be in that clan. And so when I came to the planet, I chose a mother who had already been altered in my grandmother's womb to prepare to carry me, who would be the one to carry the hybrid child. Now, the Zetas have been working in and around our government for some time now. They've had conscious knowledge and understanding of the Zetas and the Zeta mission to try and save their own species, which is understandable. But where it comes to a conflict is that this is deemed a free will zone. And when a government makes an agreement without the people's knowledge, that's wrong. And so that is a part of what I'm here to expose, being a part of that particular situation or scenario. Now, there's a lot of different hybridization programs that are going on the planet right now. It's not all Zeta. And I want to set the record straight. Not all Zetas are bad. It just happens to be that people's experience with Zeta, because of a lot of the majority of the Zetas at the time that were interacting with people have evolved out of the emotional type of response and so on. So it was scary for people. Also, when a person's paradigm is being shifted, the very first thing that we've been taught to do from the very beginning is go straight to fear instead of our own attunement, instead of our own strength and knowing who we are. And so going back to a woman of Cherokee descent too, because I also wanted to pick in this lifetime a bloodline that would serve to help reinforce my human aspect. So I chose to come in on Cherokee medicine line. And so as my blood started to activate in my early adulthood, it lent a lot of confusion, but it later in my years, as I've done my work as we are all meant to do, I came to understand more and more and more of what was happening.
Okay. So, well, let me ask you this, because I know our listeners, I want to connect the dots here. So where this is almost, and you're describing this in hindsight from the fact that now you know what your mission is, why you came. So what I would like to do is, obviously, when you were a child, you didn't know this, right? I mean, you didn't know any of this. You grew up as a what you thought you were just a human being, right? I mean, you're just one of many, right? Just living life, going through life's trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm.
But you had, because I think it's important that there's a lot here, and I want to be able to make sure that we clarify and connect the dots so people understand that this is there's a process of awakening, if you will. Okay, so you come here. So you see what I'm getting at. So if when you're a child, you are aware that you have these abilities, correct? That you do have psi ability.
Yes.
You're also aware that you're aware your dad's in the military, right? I mean, at a fairly young age. Or
my adopted dad was, because when my mother was sought out when she was 16 years old by a gentleman she described as a captain at McCoy Air Force Base, and he told her that he was a part of a bunch of top secret programs and he worked with animals. And so she fell in love. She thought she had landed herself an officer, was set for the rest of her life. And they slept together and she became pregnant. And as soon as she became pregnant, he disappeared. And so I didn't know him my whole life, but I did come to meet him one more time, which has been very powerful to have unlocked the memory, because there was some programming and stuff done. And this was part of my trip into Norad, which we'll get to here pretty soon. But basically, I didn't think that I had ever known my father or met my father until most recently, as I continue to train myself and unlock my own physical human DNA, and combine that further with the walk-in energy that I currently work with and the galactic energies, to unlock my own DNA, to remember more and more, to be able to have the capacity of holding my higher self or the higher vibration in my body at a greater detail. So even more memories start to get unlocked, even for me. But my mother started dating a man who was in the Army. And I don't think that was an accident. I really believe across my entire life, my father has moved people into my path, has moved me in front of things, to keep me in a place where he can track me. And so, and to try to help protect and watch over me. And so my adopted father, my brother's 4 years younger than me, his father was in the Army, Special Forces. And unfortunately, he did 3 tours in Vietnam, and my mother and his relationship didn't last very long because of the PTSD. But, I had several different stepfathers along the way. In my particular situation, what was really unique is, and interesting, is that when my mother, and she maybe you should have her on your radio show. I don't know if she'd ever do that, but
well, I met your mom. I met your mom and your grandmother. Remember, and they were really cool people. They were fun to meet.
They're both amazing. And it started out with my grandmother being in upstate New York and remembering a flying saucer landing in her yard. And that's where it started with her. Then my mother didn't remember anything really until she was pregnant with me. And she's got a little black book where she started drawing all the different galactic beings that started coming to her when she was pregnant with me. Because of the soul that I was before I came here, and because of the intent of coming here, I was being observed by a lot of different species and protected by a lot of different species of our galactic family. But mostly they were very, very interested in how it was going to play out, because I intended a lot of gifts. I intended that I came into this body with a lot of the gifts already activated, so that I could continue to further and exceed in my growth here on the planet. But when she was pregnant with me, it really freaked her out. And she already came from a broken background of abuse from her own father and such. So, and then fell in love with a man, thought everything was great, and was left, and then was pregnant when she was 17 and had a child just before her 18th birthday. And so she was really trying to grasp at the broken pieces herself, but things started to get really complicated for her in her life when she was pregnant with me. Those visitations, she said about 90% of them were great and the others were not. And I love to look through her book and look at the drawings and stuff. And well, from what I can see, Octurian, Syrian, Blu-ray, the reptilians showed up, but we're talking about the higher realm of reptilian governors who oversee and even maintain their own species. They're the ones with they've got like a ridge that comes like this and then back down around again. Pleiadian, a lot of Pleiadians came, and a lot of other species of our galactic family that people aren't even aware of, including a lot of elementals, including the archangel realm. And so it was really complicated for her at that young age, and it really kind of set her off, maybe not such in a great direction. She was just trying to pick up the pieces of her own life. So I had a lot of stepfathers, and one of the stepfathers that she chose happened to be very abusive, and she was absent a lot in my younger childhood. She was out trying to find her own answers. She didn't understand what was going on. She didn't really make the connection between me and these visitations. She thought it had to do with her somehow. And later on, when I was reunited with her, because we were taken away when I was 9 and placed into foster care. So a lot of my younger childhood was dealing with the gifts that I had, because from the time that I was, I have full cognizant memory from the time I was in the womb forward. And so from the time I was about 3 years old, I started having dreams of earth changes, because at that particular timeline, at the particular time, just like, I can't remember his last name, but it's a gentleman named Michael, don't remember his last name. He was putting out maps of the United States in the 70s, 80s, and of how the earth changes were going to affect the map. And we came down here to alter that timeline. We effectively did that, thankfully, because half the states would be gone by now if we hadn't. And so, moving forward into, as a child, I was trying to survive my life. I knew there was something always different about me, because I could see ghosts. I could see things that other people wouldn't acknowledge. I could see angels. I could see demons. I could see extraterrestrial life and galactics that would constantly come and check in on me. During some of the most horrible times of the abuse that I suffered, there was a point in my life I was being locked in a closet by a man, and I was being torn down psychologically in the human aspect of myself, and I thought that I might lose myself forever, that's when Archangel Michael first started appearing to me. And so that was a very powerful interaction with him, and he always and continues to keep me very strong in my darkest times here on the planet and with my mission. And so then I was adopted when I was 12, almost 13 years old, by a Southern Baptist family. And it's like I went from one extreme to the other. And then all of a sudden, all the gifts that I have of seeing the future, precognizant dreams, and being haunted by the earth change dreams were terrifying. And it was always a hit and miss. I never knew where I was. I was always just surviving life. And my adopted family was not accepting of my gifts and didn't want to hear about it. And it was very difficult to share. And as I come into my preteens, at 12, 13, the blood starts to boil for the medicine line. And so the dreams start happening, and it was all very confusing for me. And I would say a great deal of my life, I felt like I was just surviving. I never knew it was going to come next. I never knew it was going to pop around the corner.
Well, right, and I think that's an important point. I mean, I think that when you talk about where you are now, I think that some people look at that and they, like, well, how does she know? How does that happen, or how does that? That's just there's the connecting the dots of it, and I think part of that is, I don't want to say necessarily suffering, but it's not. It's a rocky journey. To come to those realizations when you don't know, right? A series of events has to occur, and this can take decades.
Yes, and it did.
And it did, right? So, and I'm sorry, I want to keep the flow going, but I think it's important for listeners to understand this is not a walk in the park by any means.
No, not at all. every single day was terrifying for me. In it because I just never knew. I mean, there was the real physical threat that I was under in my day in and day out, and I had four brothers and sisters that I was the eldest that I took care of, and it was just surviving and then having things pop out of the middle of nowhere, beings coming and trying to talk to me. I was so afraid, Jack. You know, I didn't know what to do. A lot of times I would run. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I even started to face the fact that I could even speak to people that had passed or saw these things. When I became adopted, you know, I mentioned a couple of my dreams to my biological family. Sorry, my adoptive family. You know, he took me to the church and did laying on of hands and tried to remove the devil demon from me that had all of this insight and ability. And at that point, I just shut down and didn't want to talk to anybody about it. And I was already going through psychological evaluation, and thank goodness I had developed a clear communication with Archangel Michael from the time I was a very young kid, because he helped me navigate in these psychological evaluations to say and not say, you know, from the time I was 9 years old. Because
Right.
he was like, no, don't tell him that you can talk to me. Don't tell him that you see things. Don't say anything. It'll be bad. They'll drug
Right.
you, do all kinds of different things. Now, they were drugging my brothers and sisters, but they didn't need to do that with me, thankfully. My brothers and sisters were put on Ritalin and all kinds of other type of psychological drugs and things.
And do you think it is because of their own, or were they also? Why were they also given this, or how to do that?
There goes a long ways in speaking to soul character, because you know I've even asked myself to this day, because I continue to have struggles with my biological brothers and sisters, not understanding why they continue to choose to live the way that they do in fear and so on, and continue to perpetuate the cycles that they were born into. I've been angry with them because I was the eldest. I took the beatings for you. I fed you. I made sure you were safe. Why do you choose to do this with your life now? And so I believe there's a character of soul that I've come to understand. There's a character of DNA. Even though that these all four of these brothers and sisters were born through my mother, they were by different fathers.
Right.
And people have to find their own way, do their own soul work, their own spiritual work, want to do their own soul work, their own spiritual work. You cannot force that on them. And so it's disheartening, especially our family. You know, when we look at our family and they're struggling so, and we want to help them, and we just want to, I can help you, I can do this, and it's just, no, they've got to find their own way.
Right. So now at what age did you join the military?
So when I was adopted, I was going on 13 years old, and I was in Arizona, and we then, for I think 2 years, we were there in Arizona, Southern Arizona. I went to 1 year of high school in Tucson, at Flowing Wells High School, and then we moved because my adoptive father, it was during the time of Reagan, the Reagan economics, and a lot of farmers lost a lot during a particular scandal that happened with the Reagan administration. And my adoptive father was a land leveler. He's the one who went and, you know, for all the farmers and so on. Well, he lost everything, filed bankruptcy, and we moved up to Colorado. And I often wondered if my true biological father didn't have something to do with that, because as far as I know, he's still based out of Colorado, somewhere around Norad.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that.
Right. Yeah. No, I know we're getting to that, but yeah, no, exactly. So now you're in Colorado.
Now
right?
I'm in Colorado, and the dreams start really heavily, and I'm keeping them to myself now. Prophetic dreams. So if things happening around the world, I would pick it up if there was a major major loss of life. I would be pulled to these particular areas, and it wouldn't be until later that I would understand that I could actually help people in astral projecting to these particular areas and energetic help. And so There was one incident in high school that I want to bring up. It was pretty significant. My junior year in high school, it would be 1988, I believe. I had a dream where I woke up in the dream, lucid dreaming, and I was sitting next to a girl, and a little girl, small girl, somewhere between 9 to 12 years old. And she was talking to me. And in lucid dreaming, you actually have physical sensation of what you're experiencing. And so I had the sensation of riding on the train. I'd never been on a train up to this point. So it took me a few minutes to get clear and to look around me and see what was going on. It looked like dawn, like a little bit of light but dark. This little girl was telling me about how she's going to visit her grandmother out in the country, and she's so excited. It's her first trip by herself, and on and on and on, and telling me this whole story. And at one point I realized she's speaking French to me, and I knew exactly what she was saying. And I turned my head really quickly to look at her because I'd been observing and really taking in on my surroundings. And then shortly after that, it was above the train. And then shortly after that, there was a lot of pain and screaming and metal crunching. And when I'm in the lucid state, when I'm traveling like that, there's no barrier between you and me, your suffering and mine. And so I can feel everything as if it was happening to me. And so I woke up screaming and sat up straight up in my bed, and, sweats and everything. I got up the next morning and I went upstairs, and because I was very competitive in basketball, sort of like what I really threw myself into with my anger and pain from my childhood, to really focused in on something that would make it productive for me. So I really threw myself into basketball, and we ended up at a very competitive 5A school in Denver, in Arvada, which was really great. And so my mother would put out the paper to see what was written up on us the night before. And I went upstairs, and I went to sit down, and on the table was this newspaper, and on the front page was an aerial view of the train that had derailed, and everyone had been killed save one person. And that was that picture of that little girl. And I remember that really took me back. In fact, I passed out and fell out of the chair.
Unbelievable. And it was in France?
France.
Wow.
Yep. And later in life, I went back and I tried to look up that wreck, and I was able to find it. I've lost the details on it now, but I wanted to validate it for myself, to find out where it was and what had happened and so on. So, after that, college, I was recruited to go to Adams State College on a full scholarship, and I went there because Doc Cotton was coaching there, and he's one of the original Lakers, and I really wanted to. My school wasn't very strong. My studies were not strong because my entire childhood, because of my mother being absent and basically leaving us with just whatever man there was, I never went to a full year of school until I had been adopted at 12. And in fact, they held me back a year because my scores tested so low in school. And so, I graduated a year later, which was really hard. Watching everybody my age graduate, it was complicated. My senior year, I came and went, and then I went to Adams State and was injured playing basketball. I actually broke my lower back, and and then this whole thing just kind of fell together, fell apart. The whole situation. I came to Adams State College. The man that I came there for, Doc Cotton, retired. His wife had brain cancer, so he had his son take over. And his son was kicked out of Texas, of all places, for being discriminatory against gays and lesbians. We didn't know that. And it just happened to be that my first year of college is when I started to discover that I'm gay. And so I was systematically kicked off the basketball team for being gay. And so I thought, what can I do? And so I lied about my health. I wouldn't allow them to do surgery on me so that they couldn't tell that I had injured myself. And I went to a chiropractor, and that started my whole holistic way of healing, learning to heal myself. And so this is a part that's really interesting because no way ever would I have ever joined the military willingly. And this is where I've gone back and I've done a lot of work in my own psychological makeup and the patterning of my brain, and some of the undoing a lot of some programming that had been put in natally when I was in utero, and as I was a young girl, I had been taken several times, and I didn't remember that until later, until the next big thing that we'll talk about. But basically, I joined the military July of 1990, and went off to training, and training was interrupted because Desert Storm broke out. Then we were vaccinated and sent over to Desert Storm. When I returned, I was a same person, or has a way of splintering a soul. And so when I returned, I had actually joined the military as a reservist at the time. And never thinking in a million years I'd be sent to war. I thought I could get my basketball scholarship, since I lost my basketball scholarship, that I could finish school through GI Bill. And that's the only reason why I told myself I'd join the military.
Right.
So immediately I started to suffer from physical ramifications from the vaccination of Desert Storm. So I started dealing with a lot of migraines. I started dealing with a lot of reproductive issues, female reproductive issues. And when I returned, I was suffering from severe PTSD. I wasn't the same person. I couldn't go back to college. So I dropped out and started traveling. The interesting part of it is that I dropped out and moved to Colorado Springs, of all places. And this is another one of the things where that programming came into effect. Because I know for sure my father was stationed there during that time. And this brings me to, I basically went on a drunken binge for about a year, honestly. And was really trying to put myself back together from the deprogramming and stripping down and reprogramming of the military. Because it goes against everything that I am as a soul and my soul purpose. And
right.
So at this time it was about 1992. No, I'm sorry, 94. And I know I've missed a few years there, but basically what I did is I just traveled all over. I used construction. My adopted father, after losing his business in high school, started a carpentry shop. I learned how to work with tools. I love to work with my hands. I love to be physical. So I walked onto a job site, a framing job site, and was running the crew by the end of it. And so that's what I did for a living. I also liked how temporary it was, any situation, any given job, any given town. I was so jumpy and really suffering from that PTSD that I couldn't stay in one place for very long. And so I moved around a lot. I'd been back to the East Coast, lived in Pennsylvania for about 9 months, and that's when I found my biological mother. It was about 6 months before this next thing happened. I just found my biological mother. We were united out in Pennsylvania, and then I moved back to Colorado Springs and was staying with a girlfriend there in Colorado Springs. And that's when I woke up one night and there was a Zeta standing in my room. And so I'll give you would you like me to go into the details of that evening, or how would you like me to?
Yeah, and Zeta, but what you mean by Zeta would be gray, alien gray? Okay.
Yes, the little worker guys.
Right.
Yeah. So, because I don't know if your listeners know this or not, but there are two types of Zetas. There are the little drone Zetas that follow the instructions, and they're a hive mind mentality, except for a couple of them that have evolved past that. But and there's some people that you work with, like Grandpa Gray and stuff like that have a consciousness that is outside of the drone mentality. Then there are the scientists, the tall, thin gray, Zeta Reticuli. And they can look different, actually. They can look very different. They can look very, what is it? What's the insect? The praying mantis, the
praying
mantis.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can look now there is mantis beings, and they're very, very highly evolved. And that's a whole other thing. But the Zeta tall grays can look very similar to the mantis people, but some people get them confused a lot. So at the time, I was dating this woman, We lived in Colorado Springs in an apartment complex, and our window was onto the interior of the apartment complex courtyard, and we had the blinds like you have behind you there, those white Venetian blind things. And so we were right by a lamp light outside. And so in our room, there was always lines on the opposite wall. Now, if you can imagine that to your left, Jack, there was a bed there. And if you look directly to your left and there is a wall, on the other side of that wall is the living room and the entrance into the apartment complex. The bed is like long ways towards you, and I'm sleeping towards where the window is, and then my girlfriend is sleeping to the interior and also the side of the room where the bathroom door is. And we would get in a fight all the time, stupid little things, relationship stuff. She would get up every night, announce that she was going to the bathroom, get up, go to the bathroom, open the door, turn on the light, shut the door, go to the bathroom, open the door. And so if one of the three things didn't wake me up, I was always awoken by this. And I would ask her to please just don't say anything, get up, go to the bathroom, shut the door, turn the light on, turn the light off, open the door, please be considerate. She was a Marine, and so we had a lot of fun little tossles about little ridiculous things. But one night, she had a friend in from out of town, and she was sleeping on the couch on the other side of the wall from the headboard, the bed, just to the left of you. Right. And one night we were all awoken by a blood-curdling scream in the courtyard, a woman screaming. Now, it didn't sound like she was screaming like she was being killed, just like something really scared her, and she screamed out loud. I believe that she saw the ship overhead. She just happened to be out and about and saw it. And it was 12:34 a.m., 1, 2, 3, 4. It was very interesting. And we all woke up. I looked over at the clock. I turned on my left side. It's another thing. I was a heavy left side sleeper at the time, too. So I was always facing the bathroom door. And so my girlfriend at the time, without saying anything, gets up, goes into the bathroom, does not turn the light on, shuts the door, and I hear the toilet seat cover lift up, and I hear her sit down. And I thought to myself, well, that's weird. And then I just closed my eyes, and then I don't know how long after, but all of a sudden the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I got that PTSD thing going on again, and I was ready to jump up and fight whatever was in the room that I could sense. And also a lot of the beings that would appear to me up to this point stopped appearing to me because I had developed such a violent reaction to their presence because of the PTSD that I suffered. So I was laying there, my eyes shot open, and I could see standing on the opposite wall by the door of the bathroom was a Zeta, and the light from the courtyard was hitting it just perfectly. It was completely lit up. And I went to stand up or to move, to react in any way, and I couldn't move, and I was not happy about that. And so because of the PTSD and the complication of everything else, and being in a room with something I couldn't explain, and not being able to move, I basically panicked and passed out. I had such a panic attack that I completely passed out. This continued to happen for some time. And finally, when I could get myself upon the 6th to 10th time of waking up, because I was trying to fight so hard, that I finally realized that I should just relax, because I thought I heard something in the background of my mind as I was panicking and fighting. Finally, I woke up this time and just opened my eyes. Like, I'm still here and I still can't move. What is it that you want from me? And then when I woke this time, the Zeta was a lot closer, and he said, please be calm. We're not going to hurt you. We are only here to check on you. And at that time, I started to bring consciousness and awareness to my body. And I could feel what would be likened to if you're out in the sun and then a cool breeze rolled over your body. It's like a real physical, visceral feeling of something rolling over the... And I was laying there paying attention to this thing rolling up and down my body. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. I've felt this before and had a memory of being taken before, panicked and passed out again.
Wow.
And then...
And this was all in one night, that one night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And now, okay, so now your partner is in the bathroom the whole time?
Passed out. Oh yeah.
Passed out. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And then I woke. My eyes came. Basically, whatever timing it was that I was out, I had flashes of being on a ship. Like I've started to unlock those memories. Flashes of being rolled around on a gurney in a bright lit, area. They're messing around in my reproductive area. They're just, And then all of a sudden, I'm back in my bed. I open my eyes and I sit straight up. And at the same time, the door swings wide open, the light comes on, and my girlfriend comes out of the bathroom cursing and I looked over at the clock. It was 4 hours later. Her legs had fallen asleep sitting on the toilet. Oh, gosh. So, what's really interesting about this is that she was completely obsessed with Zetas, this particular person in my life. Talked about it all the time. I hadn't even considered any other life outside of all of the other life I'd been exposed to here on the planet. And I thought it was great. I didn't not believe. I just didn't. It wasn't in my realm of whatever. And I just make fun of her a lot. And basically she came out and I was just staring at the wall where the Zeta was, and I told her something was in the room, and then she went into her immediate fight mode. And then finally, after some time, I could tell her he's not there anymore and explain everything that happened. And basically we were awake for the rest of the night from 4 a.m. On, because she wanted me to break it down for her again and again and again, and I was in shock. And she was really angry that her entire life, all she wanted to do was see a Zeta, and they came to her house and put her to sleep on their toilet.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. But after this happens, you start to ask questions, right? This lights a fire under you, so to speak.
Well, what lights the fire under me is that, the next morning I don't go to work. I'm working in construction at the time, but I take Gina to work, and I bring the car back. I don't even remember most of that morning. But I call a friend of mine, Morgan Le Fay, because I was a part of a psychic women's circle in Manitou Springs. And they seem to bring a lot of calm to my being, because everything that I experienced my whole life, they were teaching me about and telling me it was quite normal and I'm fine. And so I was really starting to find my own, path, my own strength around the gifts and abilities that I had. And so, I called her and I said, I need you to come over here. I need to talk to you about what happened last night. I wouldn't even talk about it over the phone. She got there, she walks in, she takes one look at me, and she looks me up and down, and she goes, "Why are you pregnant? I thought you said you were gay." And I'm like, "It's not even funny, Morgan. I'm not talk about jokes. I don't know what you're up to, but I need to tell you what happened last night." She goes, "Okay, we'll get to that later." But she just kept staring at me, in this really weird way. And I just said, and so I explained to her what happened, and she sat back, and she was like, "Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about." She proceeds to inform me about the Zeta hybrid program and the government program and so on and so forth. And I became very angry. Actually, to be quite honest with you, anger was the thing that I used most of my life until I've worked my way out of the use of anger and everything that I'm up to.
But so were you pregnant, or did you find out, or?
So what I did, because she told me that it was this government conspiracy, and that the women never get to keep the babies, and that no matter what I did, I was basically screwed, that I had no impact. I could have no impact on what was happening to me. And I felt violated. I felt angry. I felt a whole myriad of emotions. How dare you? What do you mean the government can do whatever they want to with my body? I mean, it was just an extremely rude awakening. Rude. Right. And so what she said is, you can't let them know that you know. If you go to a doctor and you do a pregnancy test, they'll take the baby. So what we did is we got the women's group together, and they formed a psychic circle around me. And they said, well, first of all, they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to break the soul contract. I want to keep the baby. People can't just make me pregnant, use me as an incubator, and take the child away." And so I said, they were like, "You're ready to have that baby here." I said, "Yes," not knowing really what I was getting myself into. So they formed a psychic circle. I went to that same day because I didn't believe first of all, Morgan, that I was pregnant. So of course I have her take me out, and we get every pregnancy test known to man. And over the next, well, first of all, I probably used about 10 of them that day, and they all came up positive. Gay
Wow.
here, folks. I don't, hadn't been sleeping with men, so there's no, oops, I'm accidentally pregnant. And
Right.
so it was
That's
very
incredible.
confusing. Very confusing.
Unbelievable.
For me, biologically, emotionally, spiritually. And so, so then when I realized I was pregnant, I started following to a T what the women were telling me to do every day, of circle of protection and saging and cutting ties. And this lasted, so I quit my job swinging a hammer framing, and I drove the roach coach because I was pregnant. I didn't want to endanger the baby, started taking prenatal vitamins. It was a circle of crone of women who have had many children. They were telling me what to do. I felt safe, and that everything was fine. This lasted for 4 months, and it approximately going on my 4.5 month. And my girlfriend and I weren't doing very well. Things had gotten in between us since this whole thing happened with the Zetas. For a person who really believed, she almost did a 180. It's interesting when people are truly faced with the possibility of what's out there, and what they think is fantasy or some kind of it'd be really cool to kind of see or experience, and then when it happens, some people flip the other way and become disbelievers.
Plus the fact that now you're pregnant, so she's I can only imagine how she reacted to that.
Yes, exactly, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's a really good point. Because I think that even in her own mind of minds, trying to be as believing of me as she could, I think what slipped in there is she cheated on me with a man, and she's pregnant.
Right.
Because when it started,
how else do you explain it? Right.
Yeah, because I'm skinny bean, I'm tall, skinny, and it doesn't take much to show. I get a little bloated, and it shows, So at 4.5 months, I was showing, and so. She and I were fighting a lot, and she was like, I don't care what you say. This is a real baby. You're having a real thing, and you need to go see a real doctor. And that's what you need to do. And so I talked to the women about it, and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to set a doctor's appointment with one of my doctors that will be quiet. For some reason, they don't hear there or something. They won't report it. They'll keep it quiet. So they were going to find a doctor that I could go to and Instagram, check up on things, and so on and so forth. And they were going to tell me, because they didn't want me to know when that was going to happen, just to keep it safe and outside of them. So if they were psychically watching me or remote viewing, they could, find out. So it was some days later, I woke straight up out of bed and screamed no, and felt my stomach, and it was flat. And I went through some of the most painful bleeding. And ever since then, from that point forward until the time that I was required to get an emergency hysterectomy, my whole reproductive organs were extremely compromised, basically. And so I think it was a combination between what they did and the Desert Storm syndrome that I suffered through the vaccinations that I had gotten. Because up until that point, because of the genetics that I carry, because of who I believe my father is, and what I believe happened to me in utero, the genetic manipulation in utero, I was never sick when I was young. Not once, never threw up, never got sick, never got chicken pox, never. Everybody always said I was as strong as a man, if not stronger than two. When I was in the military, I trained men in hand-to-hand combat. With as skinny as I am, I had some kind of extraordinary strength also happening. There were some things in the military that they did too. Programming, flashing lights, to this day I can't stand. Like if I go into a theater or something like that and there's flashing, it's a part of the programming techniques that they use, and it just, I have to tell my body to relax. I'm starting to get all...
Yeah, kind of retelling of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how the body viscerally reacts to memories and stuff like that, and that's a lot of the reprogramming I've had to do is go back over and program out some of the things that they've purposefully put in. But so moving forward,
So just to clarify, you at this point you know that you're not pregnant anymore. This happens one night, right? And it's not a miscarriage, correct? I want to clarify that for the
that's correct.
viewers. Okay, for
Yes,
listeners.
at that point, if it was a miscarriage, there would have been a lot more tissue, and all there was bleeding.
Okay. Okay, yeah, no, because I
No,
want so in other words, then that night something happened where that child, that baby, was gone.
yes.
Okay, so had it at this point, obviously there's a lot of emotions going on with you, anger, probably. I mean, I'm gonna imagine sadness, correct? Because you were ready to have this baby. You were ready to have this child. You had made that decision. So now you must be really pissed off.
Yeah, I had a lot of weird things happening with my hormones to begin with, and because my whole life I went to anger to try and cover up sadness. I got really angry and I started getting in the face of every military person I knew. Do you know about this hybridization program? What is these little grays? What's this all about? Is it true? I mean, I really started to question humanity. I even went and saw a psychologist a couple of times. I'm like, I just need to know I'm sane. I never told him about what happened. I just said, can you just do a psychological evaluation on me? And the only thing that came up was PTSD from the military and from some other source that she couldn't put her hand on, maybe possibly my childhood, because, we did a whole thing. But she's like, no, you're sound. But I didn't feel sound. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel, my whole paradigm had just been shattered. And I was angry and I wanted somebody to answer to what had happened. And so I was still driving the road coach because I went into a deep depression too. It was several months before I could get myself up to face anything. And I was grateful to my girlfriend at the time because she kind of supported me through that because I couldn't go to work. I couldn't deal with anything. And I would wildly swing between wanting to attack somebody and going into fitful crying sprees, just being overcome with so much emotion that I just had to break down and cry and cry and cry and then be left exhausted completely afterwards. And so I'm really grateful to my women's group who also came around me and really tried to hold me up and protect me and to console me. They told me I was going through postpartum depression, but in a very a very extreme way,
Right,
with
right.
this. And a lot of people around me were trying to support me. And I was asking, because I was in the reserves at the time, and I was asking my other reserve people, have you heard of this? Have you heard of that? Nothing, nothing, nothing. It seemed like forever. And then I really started to wonder if I really was crazy because there was no reaction from anything, from anybody. Surely, if I started stomping around and screamed loud enough, especially about some big military conspiracy cover up about a Zeta hybridization program, I was going to get somebody's attention, I thought. But it seemed like forever had passed, and it'd probably be about 3 or 4 months later that I was coming home from driving the road coach, and there was a black four-door sedan parked in my parking spot. And it was like I knew right away that they were there for me. And this is before anybody knew what the Men in Black were. Nobody ever
Right.
talked about the Men in Blacks before the movies. So I'd never had anybody tell me, even when they told me about the Zetas, nobody ever talked about that. Even my girlfriend that was a conspiracy theory nut, no Men in Black. Right? Until they showed up.
Right. And here
Um,
they are.
got out. Be careful. These guys are no joke. Okay. I got out, I slammed the door, I'm walking around, and I said, it's about damn time that somebody paid attention to what was going on. And so they were standing there, and they opened the back passenger side, no, the behind the driver's side door. And I walk up, and I'm talking all mad stuff, just going off, right? And I get in, they shut the door, they get in the front, and we're pulling away. And then finally it dawned on me, I've just gotten in the car with two strangers. And then I start to psychologically mentally take notes of everything around me. And at that point, because I'm highly trained, I could take somebody out with these two fingers, with a pen, with a knife, everything, anything, right? I'm fully trained and fully capable. And so I started like really taking stock of what I could use in the car as a weapon, and how I was going to take the driver out first with the seatbelt. And then I figured
I could see your thought. I could see you going through that thought process. No, but very valid, obviously. Very valid thoughts. Yeah.
Because I was asking where we're going, and nobody was responding to me. They had not yet said one word to me.
The two men?
Starting to disturb me. The two men.
Two men.
Yeah,
and what did they look like? Do you remember what they look like?
Absolutely, because that's some of the work I've just done in the last year, is to unlock that memory. Okay, so first of all, the viewer should know that the person in front of me was a human being. Okay, he was about 6'4". He was about 220 pounds, a decent specimen of a man, you know,
Right.
Dirty blonde hair, and couldn't see his eyes because he had sunglasses on. Okay, the good old thing. Dirty blonde, high and tight cut, though, military cut. He did have a hat on, though, but I could just see it was buzzed. The other one, though, was not human, or was one of the most advanced psyops trained person I've ever come across in my entire life. I'm empathic, and that is one of my base traits, is empathic ability. And so what that means is that I can sense what's going on in your body physically, emotionally, and through your thought process. Okay? So I can hear thoughts with pictures, whatever a person is thinking or feeling. Now, if you can imagine an empath that is so trained that they can then control the emotions and the thought process and the chemical makeup of a body, that is what I would begin with a passenger. And it took me a minute to get it sussed out because of my PTSD and the work that I've been doing. Remember how strong I am, and when I would get angry, or triggered in any way, which could happen at the slightest little thing, I would have an extreme rush of adrenaline that would run through my body. I would shake. I would have to do physical workout. I'd have to walk. I was being trained by friends around me to learn how to calm myself once it happened, because it felt like I was just walking around and anybody could flip that switch because of the PTSD that I was experiencing. So when I had the rush of adrenaline about what am I going to do? I'm going to have to take these guys out to get out of here, or plan my escape at the right time. All of a sudden, we're further down the road than we were. About 5 or 10 minutes have passed. My mind is completely blank and my body is completely calm. That freaked me out, because it literally would take me up to an hour just to get my blood pressure to calm back down again. Of focus work. And so I look at the man in front of me and I feel him. I actually send my empathic ability in and I start feeling him up and down. Nothing. And I start to go into the other one there, and I'm met with an excruciating pain in my head. And I stopped and I looked away and I looked out the window. And then I looked back, and I tried to do it without looking this time. You know?
Right.
And then I was met with another severe pain. And then I looked over at him like, who are you? You know? He would never turn and look at me directly. But I felt this push out. And then I was like, all right, I can play. I'm a baby, but I can at least try and play in my abilities and I was just learning how to use my gifts. I said, okay, I'm gonna push back a little bit. And the next thing I know, we're coming into the entrance into Norad, to Cheyenne Mountain. And so I did a little bit of battle with this particular individual for some time, and we were locked in an energetic, like frozen in time wrestling match back and forth. But that was okay for him too, because he completely took me out for the rest of the ride. out of my body. So that was his job, is to keep me calm. And I think they sent him specifically because they knew my training and they knew how strong I am, and to not even physically get me engaged would be the best way to handle the situation.
Right. So now you realize you're entering NORAD, and you lived. How far did you live from NORAD at the time?
Well, see, I lived in up on Academy, North Academy, and where we went was to a completely different entrance, which was more towards the back end part of Manitou Springs. Yeah, there's a different entrance than what other people have seen, the Cheyenne Mountain entrance, that they put on TV and stuff like that. It was a completely different entrance.
Okay.
It was a secret entrance at the time, for as far as I knew. I would say, to answer your question, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic.
Okay.
I was only conscious for about 10 or 15 of that.
Okay. So now you get in, now you're underground, correct? And for those, can you just briefly, NORAD, it's stationed in Colorado Springs, correct? I mean, that's where
Yeah.
and it's underground, and this is known that an underground facility was built for NORAD, correct?
Correct. It was initially built in a cover story, because I even have met people since then that as late as 2009, I took some training with a gentleman who is an officer for a major for the Canadian Guard, the Canadian military, and he was stationed there for the radaring thing, the cover story for NORAD, so that they can radar and they can see all over and they can track this and that and so on and so forth. And it's also supposedly be the fallout shelter for the cabinet, for the presidential cabinet, if there were a nuclear strike. Now, officially, NORAD has been moved, and they've even taken down a lot of antennas and stuff like that up on the mountain. But unofficially, I can tell you, it hasn't gone anywhere. And they're even doing more deep black ops type of thing in the mountain. There are two completely separate areas of NORAD, and I was in both of those areas, the more well-known area and then the more sub-level, deep in the ground areas.
Okay.
So I was gone for a good 7 hours in this particular time frame in the mountain. So we traveled around a lot underground, and I got to see a lot, and I've now remembered a lot, because at the end, so I'll take us back step by step so we can get it. So we drive into the mountain. People don't realize, but you actually drive in and you get out and you go to an elevator, whichever direction you're going. You can go straight across in the upper levels to the upper NORAD level of the radaring and so on and so forth, or you can try and go up and down a few levels in that area, or you can travel off to the right in the back half of the mountain and go really deep, about 7 levels into that area there. So when I came into, I tried several times to engage my escorts, and there was never a word spoken. But it became very obvious what I was supposed to do, because they would flank me and walk me into particular areas. One of the first areas that I came into was it looked like just like a regular building that you would walk around in. But beginning from where we were to there was a lot of concrete conduit down the hallway, small fluorescent lights or long lights lit, and several different elevator rides to these different areas, up and down, really deep into the mountain. And then we'd walk really far. The first place that they brought me, I apologize, the first place that they brought me to was a different area than what looked like the inside of a building. The first place they brought me into looked like military installations, a lot that I'd been into, a lot of military, like things hanging on the wall, the way that they made the rooms, how they had that room set up. And at one point they walked me all the way through this area and in towards the back. And when I say back, in the back of Cheyenne Mountain. Because there's the front part where NORAD is in Colorado Springs, and then you've got a little hill right here, which is where Manitou Springs comes from. We were back in the back. And they walked me up to this area, and it looked like a blast glass. I know what blast glass looks like. I was in the military. Very, very thick glass. And I look out, and I look down. It looks like about at least 4 stories down and then out several football fields wide. And there were all different kinds of aircraft. Now, I don't know all the different aircraft, but I was around the military enough to know that there were different aircraft from different periods of time being stored down there. We're talking carriers, and the enormity of the area took my attention away for so long that I didn't realize what they were wanting me to do until about 5 minutes later, after just looking everywhere. Like I look at them, because they walk me up and then turn out, face, and I'm looking at this one, and I'm looking at this one, and I'm 6'3". I'm looking up at these guys, so they're big guys. And then I look down, and I'm like, what am I supposed to see here? And then all of a sudden, off at about 11 o'clock, about a football field away, about 100 yards away, was this disc, just there. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And I turned and I looked at him like, do you see that? And then off we go. And I say now, like to this day, I wish I wouldn't have said anything, because I'd have liked to have been able to sit there and study it a lot more and see if I could find more of them in there. But there were hundreds of aircraft in this area. And then so we turn around and off we go. So turn around and off we go. And then we go in a completely different area and this is where we look like it's inside of a science building, or like if you were to go to a laboratory building, and they have all different kinds of lab rooms set up and they're doing different things. And we're just walking through, and it's well lit and drywalled walls. And then we walk into a room, and there's a little, he makes me laugh every single time I think about this geeky little scientist guy is so excited that he gets to tell me something. Whatever it is, that he gets to show me something, right?
Right.
And so, the whole white jacket, the whole pocket protector thing, everything this guy was, the glasses. I'd say he's probably about 5'6", a little bit chubbier dude, less healthy, probably just doesn't get out very much. I'm not sure they ever let him out of this place. Probably had to order in all kinds of food. I don't know. But he was working in a room inside of a room. And I walked into this room. He was very excited. He's like, okay, so I'm really excited about showing you this thing. He's talking really, really fast. And I'm still very guarded and very standoffish. Like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're about to do. But, But when we walked into this room, our guards, escorts, stopped on the outside of this outer room. And I was able to go in with this gentleman and speak with him. There was computer panels, another interior room with some glass set up, and inside there were a bunch of different lab-looking equipment around this entire room. So on the outside of this room, they had computers. They could look into the interior of this room. And I would say the interior of this room was about 15 feet by like 25 feet long. 25 feet. Yeah, it was kind of a bigger interior room. About 20 feet by 20 feet maybe. Anyway, walk it off sometime and see if you're curious. So he said he wanted to show me something. And so he went inside of a room. He was talking to me. He takes a Pepsi can he had been drinking, and he lifts up this round, see-through, like plexiglass glass. He lifts it up. He sticks it in there. He shuts it. He comes back around. I'm having a hard time unlocking a lot of the gibberish stuff that he was saying to me, but it doesn't matter. It was small talk. And he came outside, and he wanted to show me some of the technology that they were able to accrue, to obtain from someplace. Not that they created it, that they obtained this technology. And that he was going to show me how some of this technology works. And so he was like, because we come back outside, he's messing around on his computer, and he points at the Pepsi can. And I'm looking at the Pepsi can, and he does something, blah, 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 and he gets all excited. And then, because he gets all excited, I look down at him for some reason, and then I look back up again, and the Pepsi can's on the other side of the room. He points over there. He goes, and I looked at him. I mean, the first thing I did was I went, come on.
Right.
Yeah, come on. And he was like, you missed it. He goes, oh, come here. He comes in, He opens it up. He takes the Pepsi can out, and I remember it's the old Pepsi, symbol and everything. It's gone through like five or six revisions since then. And he takes something out of his pocket. It's like a pointy thing, and he scratches an X into the can. Okay. I also have not quite a photogenic memory, but I've got a very good visual. I'm able to capture a lot. Like when I also was trained to do that too. When I walk into a room, I survey the entire thing. Just one glance, I can tell you who's where, what are they wearing, and generally, what is their energetic makeup? Are they a threat? Immediately
Right.
at any room, I still do it to this day. I walk in and it's just an automatic thing. And so he goes over and he puts the Pepsi can back under the initial thing. And he walks me back out again. And he was like, this time, do not take your eyes off of that can. And he's pointing and he's doing something with his right hand. So I'm watching the can. And I kid you not, like 30 seconds later, the thing starts to dissipate, just like on Star Trek. Like it dematerializes. And then he whips his hand over there, and I look over, and it rematerializes on the other side. And I was just like, and the first thing I say, as I said, bullshit.
Right.
And he was like, I was like, what are you doing? You're wasting my time. And so he takes me in there and he opens it up and he shows me the can, and it's that same scratch. And I was like, wait a minute. Whoa. I said, where did you get this from? He goes, well, it's really interesting. Back in the and it's like something choked him off.
Oh my gosh.
He couldn't even get the rest of the world. 19. And I turn and I look, and there's that one escort, the one that's not human. I don't think. And he's standing there. And I'm like, and then, the little guy goes scurrying off. Like he knows he probably did something wrong, and was fearing for his life, and he ran away.
Right.
And then out we go and off to another area. So,
let me just real quickly ask you, were you scared at up until this point or just intrigued? How did you feel?
I was intrigued at this point. It was sort of like even though I knew I was being escorted by something, and I didn't necessarily have full control of the situation. My curiosity out of the hell that I just endured over the last 3 or 4 months was outweighing my fear at this point.
Right.
Wisely or unwisely is up for you to determine.
Yeah, no, I mean that's and plus what you're seeing is so incredibly mind-blowing. So now you leave this area with the scientist, and now they take you somewhere else?
To a completely different area. It took a long time to get back into the back part of this area. That's when they walk. This is where I start to become very not comfortable about the story. But they get me into a completely different area, and they bring me into a room. It's different than the blast glass area. Blast glass area had a table in it, like it could be a conference room, and people could look out over it, or they could observe, or they could take stock of, or they could take tally of something. This particular room was like it was hidden away. And we go walking into this particular room, and the one stops on the outside, and we walk inside, and it's a completely empty room except for a whole glass area. And we go walking up to this glass area, and the one that I don't think is human came up and pushed a light, and a light came on, and I took a step back and a big breath, actually, because laying inside of the room on a metal table with a glass covering, I could make up like it's a hyperbaric chamber. I don't know. Maybe they're keeping it from decomposing. I'm not really sure. But was a tall Zeta, the tall gray, the scientist ones. Okay?
Right.
And then I because of the abilities that I have, I can go into a being, alive or deceased, and play back the last moments of that being's life. Now, it's tricky because there for a while I worked as a medium, and I also worked with Colorado Search and Rescue to find people, and at the time they came to get me, I was finding bodies. They didn't understand what they were asking me to do. They were asking me to experience that person's last moments so that I could locate their body,
right.
Which was very tough for many years when I was working with them. So when I went in, because at first I did the first step back, and then I smiled and I looked at him like, I don't know what you guys are trying to pull here. All right, I'm going to go into this. I bet it's a mannequin. I'm going to go in and find out it's not biological. And I was far from the truth when I did. I experienced the last moments of torture of this being that had been tortured for information.
Really?
And yes.
So this particular, whatever this being was, it was not a joint effort with this being. There was something else going on.
Yes, that's correct. Made to give information, kept until it was given information. It tried not to give it the information as best that it could, and then it moved to torture, and then it moved to the brain being removed for more
analysis,
science research. Yeah.
So maybe a down craft, maybe that he was in, or that's fascinating. I guess we can only...
But I think that really what had happened was you've heard about the Dulce Wars, correct?
Yeah, I have heard that. Yes.
There was a time that there was a group of Zetas that were working with the government at Dulce, and they thought that they were working with the government in an even exchange, and that wasn't. And it ended up escalating into the Dulce Wars, and I believe that this particular being, thinking that it was working of its own volition, was then taken hostage after the Dulce Wars.
And that was, and if for the listeners who know, I think that's Phil Schneider was involved in that. Apparently, that's what he said. He was involved in that scuffle, in that firefight, if you will. So, yeah, that's a fascinating story. So, wow. So, so they show you these things. Okay, there's more to it. So go ahead. So now they show you this, and now you know because you know that this is real.
Yeah, I go reeling back, and the first thing I start doing was crying because the rage and the sadness and despair of this individual of even giving the information that it did, knowing that it was giving a loaded gun to toddlers, was palpable in the energy of this being that lingered after. And I just felt so sorry for it, Yeah. And so it was at that point that all of a sudden, because I had the personal experience by re-experiencing this being's experience with the military, all of a sudden I was filled with fear and, oh my God, I'm not going to make it through this, And all of a sudden I was just like all jumpy and like, oh God, they're going to kill me. What are you going to do with me? What's going to happen? What's going on? I don't know. I don't understand. And so then I was brought into another area. It seems like more towards the front and more towards the well-known and more trafficked area of the Norad, but still in the lower levels. I was brought into a conference room and I was sat down, and I chose to go to the very back of the room, put my back to the back wall because that's what I would always do. And they flanked me on either side. I sat there. In my mind, I think I was there for about 30, 45 minutes. I was saying goodbye to everybody I knew. I had just found my biological family. I just got everybody reunited again. I was thinking about everybody that I knew and loved. And even though I'd been sort of absent because I was trying to find my own answers as a young person and was angry, and I would miss them, and thought how bad it was that I was not going to be able to get to say goodbye to them, and how horrible it was that I was just going to disappear. And I was playing all these scenarios through my mind. And then all of a sudden the door opens. But before the door opened, the one that was less human, like I referred to, straightened up a little bit. And I understand now why. My father, I didn't understand at the time, comes walking through the door. And he looks a little bit older at this time, but it could just be an ongoing facade that he's putting on for the people that he's stationed with, and so on and so forth. He's wearing the green-gray aviation suit that zips up, and all rank and insignia removed because I would know what they were.
Right.
Because they're Velcro. You can take them on and off and so on and so forth for battle, and you can take your rank off, and everything had been removed. And he walks into the room. Now at the time, listen, I didn't know it was my father. I thought I was the most scary individual I'd ever met in my whole life just walked into the room. Reeked of high ranking high ranking. In fact, it's outside of ranking military, and didn't understand till later. Richard Dolan talks about the breakaway societies and so on. He carried that in the air, that he carried in his physique. And he came and he sat down and he crossed his legs and he looked at me for a long time. And finally he said, "Now that you know, stop digging." And I was like, now that I know what? I am scared to death. I don't know what you have me here for. And he interrupts me and he starts naming off first my biological family and where they live right now, and then my adopted family and where they live, my brothers and sisters that I'd just been reunited with. And basically in that silver tongue kind of way, I know everybody that is a part of your life. And he's like, you need to stop digging. Stop talking about it. Stop it. And I was very afraid. And recently, I was doing work to continue to further uncover memory locks and lockdowns and recover removed memories, which is something altogether different and hard to do. But I was sitting there and I felt, because all of a sudden I went blank because I unlocked this memory and I was staring straight ahead and I couldn't move. And this individual, actually before that happened, the individual, the non-human came up, sorry, he was on my left side. He came up on my left side, or it could be backwards in the way that I'm seeing it in my mind's eye. He came up on my left side and actually put his hand on my shoulder and I went blank and started staring forward. And then my father got up and he walked around the table and he came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder and he leaned in so that I could see him because I couldn't move. And he told me, he said, "I'm your father and I'll continue to protect you the best that I can, but you've got to stop this or I won't be able to." And so he said, "No, I'm always with you and I'll always be there and I'll do everything that I can to protect you." And then the next thing I knew, I was standing in my living room facing the wall, staring at the wall.
And that, so you don't remember a ride back?
No. Because it's so difficult to get in and unlock these memories, I pick and choose the ones that are most important to try to go in and unlock. One day, I will allow a regressionist to work with me, but because my story is so complicated and the different energies that I work with, when I first started to have a walk-in experience, I thought that it would be really great to work with a well-known Leo Sprinkle. Leo Sprinkle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was, we interviewed him for the documentary. Great guy. Yeah. Yeah, he's really good at that.
Yeah, he's really amazing.
Sierra, honestly, one of the things that blows me away about this is the layers of, from a familial standpoint. In other words, not only from, so your biological mother, your grandmother, your mother, your biological father, your stepfathers, it's all connected. And certainly going back further to your decision to come back into that situation because of who you are from a galactic standpoint, okay? But I have to say that one of the themes that keeps popping up over and over again, and it did with Stan Romanek, and it did with several people I've interviewed and have researched, is that there's a military connection in the family.
Yes. What people don't understand is when you join the military, you not only give your own body to the military, you give your entire family and their genetic line to the military.
Okay. Right, and this is obvious from these, right, and that's what I'm gathering from this, and it's amazing to me, and there's so many things I think of, that your father must care about you. He cares about you. He's in this position of such knowing and power, obviously, that. And he has a job, whatever that job is, to do. And have you asked yourself, and I know there are a lot of shades of gray here, but is he doing good? Is he doing bad? Is it mostly bad? Is it mostly good? What exactly is going on here? Are they doing I say it's trite to say good guys and bad guys in this.
It is.
Really trite.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't help but think, well, what is this all about? And that's for another conversation. I just from what I'm getting from this is that, how do you even start to consider, just based on the tall Zeta, to me it seems the way you're describing it is that he was kind of a you would quote unquote good guy in this, that he was just a very evolved being who had a lot of knowledge and understanding of technology, and we used and abused this being until we finally killed it. That's what I'm gathering from that. And I might be wrong, but it seems that it's pretty intense.
That's right.
Pretty intense. So you now, we're going to have you back on because there's a lot more to go through. But so now you have this experience, and it does the point gets through to you, correct? You're scared. You're scared for your family, right?
I'm scared for my life, and there was a lot of subconscious programming that they did, and there's a possibility that they also used drugs along with the mind manipulation of this particular individual. But when I got back and I'm facing the wall and I wake up in my apartment, the very next thing I do is pack all my stuff and go on the run. I'm out. I'm gone. And for about 10 years, about 8 or 9 years, I wouldn't have a checking account. I worked for cash. I would get in my truck and I would drive to a town that I was drawn to, and I would show up in a coffee shop and I'd talk to people and let them know I did remodeling, and by word of mouth, I'd be able to support myself. And if I'd get the funniest little tickle, I'd be out. I'd be gone. I only had as many things that could fit in my pickup truck, and I'd be gone in an hour, type of a thing. And I lived like that for way too long. But during that time, what started to happen was an unfolding of more of my abilities, unfolding of more of my memories, and I took that and I buried it deep. The whole thing about being pregnant, but having, the whole thing, Norad, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I buried that deep and I ran. And I tried to go on with my life. And then in 2003, I met a woman. I ended up coming back to Colorado, and I met a woman who was like, "Man, you're all screwed up. You need landmark education." And I'm like, "What's landmark education?" Well, anyways, it ended up being an extremely powerful tool for me to be able to grab onto my own ontology, my human ontology, and put it where it's supposed to go. Fear where it's supposed to go. Completely unconstrain myself from everything in my past, not only my childhood, but all the way up into this thing and ongoing and so on. And then I thought, right, this all happened because I'm meant to help people. And that's when I started with my making myself available to people, doing readings, talking to them about their own spiritual growth, so on and so forth. I became a minister, and then I hung a shingle and started doing the work. And as I started to gain in my power and in my own belief in my abilities, it seemed like I started becoming under more attack. And so what I do know about my father and the military is that there's a lot of simultaneous programs running at the same time that have no idea that the other is running. So the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. It's compartmentalized. It's made to be that way through the military. My father, who I'm sure holds some high ranking and has a lot of authority and position, cannot even make himself known to certain departments that may have been torturing this Zeta for information and then subsequently killing it and taking its stem cells, type of a thing. But he is in the know enough to know, or to try to protect me all of these years and move me out of harm's way one way or the other. Now, I have come under a lot of attack. I won't kid around about that, but mostly it's been more attack on my own self-belief and my own self-destruction until recently. And there was the beginning of last year, I was driving the next time that I got reinforced that my father is still watching, because I thought maybe he's not around. Maybe he's gone to another planet like a bunch of them have done. to skip town because people are waking up and the hammer's going to come down on these people, and they're scattering right now and trying to figure out who's going to take the blame for this thing and that thing and so on. But obviously he's still around because let me just explain to you this way. I continued to develop, and then I started to come under certain protocols to try to hold my own ability down, to keep me from accessing certain memories, to accessing certain abilities. And so I would go through these really severe brain traumas and different things like that. I had ended up getting a hysterectomy, full hysterectomy, and then, but right after that, I started stroking, which I believe was another built-in mechanism to actually take me out if I got to a certain position or level inside of memory and ability and so on. And I started stroking and stroking and stroking and died. And this was October 15th of 2007. And I had been working in landmark education. I'd been working with people, had a really very successful building business and spiritual business, and was working with the Colorado Search and Rescue, was really coming into my full power. And I started stroking one day and then died. And during this particular exchange, that's when I encountered my walk-in during that time, because I was taken up on ship, and I was sat at a table. Didn't know it was a ship until later, because a lot to unlock later. And to my right was an angel, and to my left was a light being, just in pure light form. And the angel looked at me and said, "Your body has been too severely damaged. It's too important. We've done too much work up to this point to lose you in the timeline, in your work in the timeline. This being is going to take your place." I said, "Oh, no." Oh, no, he's not.
You mean take over your body?
Yes, as a complete walk-in, as a replacement walk-in.
Okay.
And because of the damage that was done, when a replacement walk-in or an energy of this magnitude comes into a physical body, they can help to accelerate the healing and help the physical body heal. And I said, "Oh no, have you looked back over my life, everything that I've been through, the thing it is that I'm trying to do here? Absolutely not. You do not have my permission." And I said, "What is another alternative?" And we all confirmed, and we had decided that we were going to try something that was risky for both energies, myself as a soul and this other being, to do what they called a braided walk-in. 2 souls, 1 body. Whew. That was tough for a while, I can tell you that. And that's when I met you, actually. I'd just come into that. I just started to understand. And because even after I awoke after my stroke, I was completely paralyzed on my left side. I couldn't speak. There was over 25% of my brain had been damaged because I was stroking on both sides of my brain. And the cause of it was a hole in my heart, a congenital hole in my heart that was compounded by the Yasmin that I was taking for hormone replacement therapy that had already killed millions or thousands of women up to that point. Nobody was talking about that. So I just started stroking one day, and it was shooting to all the both sides of my brain. And so when I awoke, I was in intensive care. They said, "We still don't know why you're stroking. We haven't figured that out yet. We're trying to keep you alive at this point." But you know how doctors are, just to prepare you for what to expect. They were telling me I'd never walk or talk again and just get used to it. And I was very calm. I already felt the presence of this walk-in, of which I referred to as an angel for quite some time, until I could understand what the dynamics of that was. Because this being's job for the first year was to help me repair my body. And so, needless to say, 6 weeks later, I walked out of that hospital because of the intense energy and healing that I was undergoing. It was a year later, so that was 2007, 2008. It was 2009 that this being started making itself present, in that all of a sudden I was having thought processes that were not mine, and I knew it was not me. And here comes the second part of my life where I thought I was losing my mind. In fact, I think I even talked to you about that a couple of times, Jack, when we first met. I'm like, I got to be honest with you, Jack. I don't know if I'm schizophrenic. I'm losing my mind. I got split personalities here. I have no idea what's happening. Because You literally came into my life when I was trying to figure out what is going on. and all these memories were coming up about the Zeta baby and the experience during that time. And that stupid movie, The Fourth Kind, came out at that time. It's such a horrible movie.
Right.
Just spread so much fear. I don't condone it. And so, and then I started meeting all these wonderful people, Stan Romanek and everybody at the PRF up in Denver, and they were trying to give me as much support as they could, but nobody that I talked to knew what was going on with me. Like, I was going to them like, what is happening to me? I feel like I'm two different people. What is going on? And then I did the work, and again, here I am, still in the dark, feeling like these things are happening to me. And then all of a sudden, when it became apparent what was going on, I was like, really? Really? Haven't I done enough? Every once in a while, I have to tell you guys, it felt like the whole weight of the world was on my shoulders. Like it was my sole responsibility to save the earth from the earth changes, the dreams that I as a soul had put into my own body to remind you, never sleep, never rest, always stay on mission. This is extremely important what you're doing here. And always the mission first, the soul mission first. And I would come across different times in my life. You know, it's normal. You want to settle down. You want to get a normal job. You want to have a normal life. Oh, no, that has not been allowed for me this entire time I've been here. It's just been, then the universe goes, bam, that's gone. Bam, that's gone. Okay, now focus on what's important. Get on with your mission.
Well, let me ask you a couple quick questions. Again, just to clarify a couple things. So, this other light being who it was the braided walk-in was you coming back into your body, and this other being coming back to help heal you, right? Because your body was a disaster at that point. And obviously that since that's happened, it took a little while for you to, and then you started to feel again that there was this other thought process, this foreign thought process, and this other being in your body.